Hi everyone, and welcome to Azure Infrastructure and DevOps series YouTube channel. So today we will simplify user permissions in Azure DevOps, which is very crucial for both security and productivity of your team members. So in our previous video, I explained a bit connecting your Azure DevOps users to Azure Active Directory. That's to manage the identity of users in Azure DevOps via Azure Active Directory, where you can assign the IAM roles directly from Azure DevOps, and the users will inherit it and perform their roles on DevOps environment. Or you can as well assign policies from Azure DevOps or role-based access control. You can as well configure custom role-based access control from Azure DevOps, assign it to users or group from Azure Active Directory, and then they will inherit it directly from Azure DevOps because you have already connected your Azure Entra ID, or formerly known as Azure Active Directory users, to your DevOps environment. So today, basically, I'll be giving an overview of the inbuilt permissions on Azure DevOps environment itself, which basically we have two levels of built-in permissions here. You have organizational level roles and project level roles. So for project level roles, for instance, yes, you come to project settings, and then you get to permissions. So each permission that you assign to users within this interface is only limited to this particular project, and that user cannot perform extra functionality on a different project within this organization. So, but if you assign that same role on organizational level to this user by going to the organizational setting and assigning that to the permission on the organizational settings, then the user will be able to perform such on all the projects within this organization, because you can have multiple projects in one organization. So here you have this on organizational settings, which is still the same role that you have on project settings. So the level where you assign those roles determines what the user will be able to perform and the limitations the user will have. So I'll give explanation of these roles now, and then give you a quick walkthrough on some of them. So here we have a project administrator, so a build administrator. So this build administrator can create, modify, and delete build definitions, manage queued and completed builds. So in your pipeline, this build administrator can actually delete a build, modify the build. Let's say this is my pipeline. Okay, good. The build administrator will be able to edit this build, modify that, trigger the build again, and the rest. But you won't be able to perform certain actions like creating a service connection that is used to trigger this build and few other functionalities. So that's this. Then for the contributor, the members of this group can add, modify, or delete items within the project. So just like the build administrators, so this one's on a specific build or specific pipelines. So the contributors for the project entirely can modify things on the project, you can add things on the project. Then we have a deployment group administrators. So members of this group accounts for people who should be able to manage all deployment groups. So in our previous video where I treated about deployment groups, but just a quick overview of that. So with deployment groups, will help you to set up your deployments into different groups. So instead of having a repetitive task on different deployments, you can group them together, and then on subsequent deployments you can just trigger them. Then with this deployment group permission, so each user that inherits or is assigned this role will be able to create deployment groups, modify deployment groups, and make use of that. Then we have endpoint administrators. These endpoint administrators it has a similar role to this project administrators, in the sense that with this endpoint administrators, you'll be able to create your pipeline, you'll be able to set up a service connection. And for you to be able to set up a service connection, you need a permission on the DevOps environment, and then that same account should have a permission on Microsoft Azure portal. That is a subscription level role for the service connection to be able to deploy resources, and then Azure Entra ID role if you are making use of service principles, and then there are some application functionalities or role assignments that you would like to perform depending on the configuration of your pipeline. So endpoint administrators will be able to create service principles or manage service connections between this DevOps environment and then external resources like Microsoft Azure, GitHub, or any other service provider that is supported by Azure DevOps. Then we have endpoint creators. Members of this group should include account for people who can create service connections. So members of this group can as well create service connections. However, there are some limitations. Some limitations in the sense that, okay, let me give a scenario here. If you are creating a service connection, if you're creating a service connection on a project settings, in some scenarios, let me give you an instance where using Azure Resource Manager template, you will not be able to grant access to all the pipelines based on the scope. Good. So from this interface now, based on my permission here, so even if I create a test service connection again, or whatever, then I'll be able to grant this service connection access to all the pipelines within this project based on the scope of the permission I have as endpoint administrators and then project administrators. Endpoint administrators alone can as well do that. But with this permission here, that is a endpoint creators, you will be able to create service connection, but on the process, this will be grayed out. You won't be able to grant it access to all the pipelines. There will be few limitations on what you'll be able to do, despite the fact that you'll be able to create a service connection. So the service connection we'll be creating will have limitations on pipelines it can run on and the actions it can perform. So that's it about this. Then we have project administrators, and this group can perform all operations in this team project. It's just like having an owner role of a subscription or a global administrator on Azure Entra ID. So you'll be able to perform all actions. So as I stated earlier on, that if you have this endpoint, if you have this project administrator, you can perform this endpoint administrator role as well. So not only this, with this project administrator or any user added to this group can perform all the actions, because it's just like, as I stated, it's just like owner role of a subscription or a global administrator on Entra ID. So this is like the global administrator. You'll be able to perform every other function within this scope. Then you have valid users, project valid user. Members of this group have access to team project, and then you'll be able to see the users. This is basically for stakeholders. So they are not deploying some code or whatever, but to be able to have visibility over people that have access to the environment and their roles. So similar to the likes, members of the readers, which access the team project. So these two, whichever group you assign user to on this, any user you assign to any of this group will be able to have access and visibility to users and their roles within this project, but we will not be able to assign those roles to other users or even to themselves. Then on release administrators, members of this group can perform all operations on release management only, not on build or anything, but on pipeline releases. And then we have okay, this is just a default project I created, and then with this you have a default role, which is basically project administrators. So these are the 10 major roles. Aside this, that's the 9 major roles that you have within here. You can as well create a group and name it whatever, depending on the naming convention you have on your environment, and then add the users from it. So if you are adding this user, if you are creating your own role here or group, you add these users from Entra ID or from here. So if they are from the Entra ID, then the permission of this will be coming from Microsoft Entra ID. So once any user is added here, it inherits that either Azure policy, custom role-based access control, or whatever permission that has been assigned to the user from the Azure AD. So that's all for the permission. Yeah, please don't hesitate to drop your comment on the link below on this YouTube channel, and then let me know if you have more questions or need clarifications, or maybe the next topic or feature of Azure DevOps that you would like us to treat on the next video that we're going to do. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the like button and subscribe so that you follow the updates. See you in our next video. Thank you.